You already know who he is. He's the one who pauses before he speaks, the one who shrinks in rooms where he should take control, the one who keeps saying, maybe someday, but deep down means never. He is not your past. He is not your trauma. He is not even your fear. He is a decision you keep choosing every single morning, and until you name him, until you stare him directly in the eyes and call him exactly what he is, he will continue running your life from the shadows. Machiavelli understood something most men will go their entire lives without realizing. Your greatest enemy does not exist outside of you. He exists in the version of you that became too comfortable, too safe, too addicted to the warmth of mediocrity. That version whispers at night, "You're not ready. The timing isn't right. What will people think?" And you listened. You allowed a ghost to make your decisions. Here is your first truth, and accepting it will cost you something. The weak version of you is not protecting you. He is trapping you. Every excuse you make, every moment you hesitate, every room you walk into, already defeated, you are choosing a smaller life. And the world does not remember men who chose small. Number 2, the psychology of self-betrayal. Here is what nobody tells you. The most dangerous prison ever created has no walls, no guards, no chains. It is built entirely from your own decisions. Every time you knew what needed to be done and you didn't do it, you placed another brick. Every time you suppressed your ambition to make someone else comfortable, you added more concrete. Every time you stood in front of the mirror and negotiated with your own greatness, you tightened the lock a little more. This is what Machiavelli recognized as the fatal weakness of men who could have been great. Not a lack of talent, not a lack of opportunity, not a lack of intelligence. It was the constant, daily, almost ritual-like act of betraying themselves. And the darkest part, it feels safe. Self-betrayal always disguises itself as wisdom. It calls itself patience when in reality it is paralysis. It calls itself humility when it is actually fear dressed in a noble disguise. It tells you to wait, to shrink, to soften your edges so the world can digest you more easily. And you believed it because it sounded like your own voice. Dark psychology exposes something brutal about the human mind. The version of you that fears greatness is not weak because it lacks strength. It is weak because it has been conditioned. Conditioned by every rejection you absorbed without understanding. Conditioned by every authority figure who told you to stay realistic. Conditioned by every environment that rewarded obedience and punished ambition. You did not consciously choose this weakness. But here is the cold Machiavellian truth. It does not matter how you got here. What matters is whether you have the ruthless self-awareness to recognize the cage and the discipline to walk out of it. Most men never do. They spend their entire lives rearranging things inside their prison and calling it progress. But you are still here, still listening, and that means something inside you already knows. The weak version has had enough time. His chapter is over. Drop in the comments right now and type, "My weakness dies today." Say it and mean it. Number 3, the Machiavellian truth about fear. Let's talk about fear. Not the fear of death, not the fear of pain. Those are real fears, primal and understandable. I'm talking about the small fear, the quiet fear, the one that has no claws and no teeth, yet somehow sits at the head of your table and controls every decision in your life. The fear of being judged, the fear of failing in public, the fear of wanting something so badly, trying so hard, and still ending up with nothing. That fear, the one you disguised as logic and called caution, the one you wrapped in responsibility and called maturity, that fear has been stealing from you every single day, and it has been doing it with your full permission. Machiavelli wrote that men are driven by 2 forces, love and fear, and he understood something most men never truly grasp. Fear, when it lives inside you, does not make you careful. It makes you controllable. It makes you predictable. It makes you easy to manipulate, easy to ignore, and easy to replace. The man who fears the judgment of others will always be a puppet. He will always edit himself before speaking. He will always shrink his vision to fit someone else's comfort. He will always choose the approval of the crowd over the calling of his own soul, and the crowd will still forget him by morning. Dark psychology reveals the mechanism behind this with precision. Fear does not just stop you from acting, it rewires you. It teaches your nervous system that safety exists in smallness. It conditions you to associate ambition with danger, visibility with threat, and greatness with arrogance. So you stay hidden, you stay average, you stay acceptable, and slowly, without even realizing it, you stop reaching entirely. You call it acceptance. Machiavelli would call it surrender. The untouchable man does not defeat fear by pretending it isn't there. He defeats it by moving with such focused, calculated intention that fear cannot keep up. Right now, in the comments, type, "Fear is fuel, not a stop sign," because that is exactly what it is. Number 4. The architecture of the untouchable man. Now we build. Because destruction without construction is just chaos, and chaos belongs to men without vision. You have identified the weak version. You have understood the psychology of your own self-betrayal. You have faced fear and named it for what it is. Now it's time to understand what you are actually building toward. Not a fantasy, not a motivational quote, not some empty affirmation you repeat until you half believe it. I'm talking about a complete psychological reconstruction, a total rewiring of how you think, how you act, how you exist in this world. This is the structure of the untouchable man. And it is not built on confidence alone. It is built on something colder, stronger, and far more dangerous than confidence ever was. The first pillar is ruthless self-knowledge, not the comfortable kind, not the version where you list your strengths and feel good about yourself. The brutal kind, where you sit alone in silence and force yourself to confront every weakness, every pattern, every lie you have been telling yourself with surgical clarity. Machiavelli was obsessed with this. He knew that the ruler who cannot see himself clearly will always be controlled by those who can. Self-deception is not just a flaw, it is a strategic weakness. The untouchable man knows exactly where he is vulnerable because he refuses to be blindsided by his own ignorance. He studies himself the way a general studies enemy land, with cold precision, no emotion, and absolute honesty. The second pillar is controlled detachment. This is where dark psychology becomes your greatest weapon. Most men leak emotions constantly. Their frustration is visible, their desperation obvious, their need for validation written all over them. And the world feeds on that. People, systems, and circumstances will always take advantage of the man who cannot control his emotional output. The untouchable man feels everything. He is not numb, he is not empty, but he has built a solid wall between what he feels and what he shows. He has mastered the art of revealing nothing that can be used against him. His face is controlled. His words are precise weapons. His silence speaks louder than most men's noise. The third pillar is long-term vision over short-term comfort. This is perhaps the most Machiavellian principle of all. The weak version of you is addicted to immediate relief, quick validation, instant comfort, the easiest path that feels like rest but is actually decay. The untouchable man plays the long game. He makes decisions not based on how they feel today, but on where they position him years from now. He is willing to be misunderstood now in order to become undeniable later. He sacrifices present applause for future legacy. He plants trees whose shade he may never sit under because he understands that greatness is not built in moments of inspiration. It is built in thousands of quiet moments where you chose discipline when comfort was right there, waiting for you. Drop in the comments right now and type, "I am the architect of my own power," because weak men wait for the world to build something for them. Untouchable men pick up the tools themselves. Number 5. The cold science of reinvention. Understand this clearly. Reinvention is not motivation. It is not a vision board. It is not a new year, new me caption posted for validation from people who do not matter. Reinvention, in its truest Machiavellian form, is a surgical operation performed on yourself without anesthesia, without applause, and without an audience. It is the most brutal act of self-respect a man can commit. Because to truly reinvent yourself, you must be willing to destroy the version of you that the world has grown comfortable with, the version they have labeled, categorized, and stored away in their minds, the version that has been playing a role for so long, he forgot it was just a role. That version must die. Not slowly, not politely, completely. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful men in history were not born powerful. They were shaped through deliberate, calculated transformation. They studied their environment with ruthless precision. They identified what worked, eliminated what didn't, and rebuilt themselves around a single, uncompromising vision of who they needed to become. This was not inspiration. This was design. This was engineering applied to the human soul, and the process was never comfortable, never praised in its early phases, and never understood by those watching from the outside. The crowd only celebrates the outcome. They never witness the rebuilding. They never see the years of cold, silent, grinding transformation that took place in the dark, when no one was watching, when no one was applauding, when the only force pushing you forward was the absolute refusal to remain who you once were. Dark psychology adds a layer to this that most self-help content will never dare to mention. The people around you have a psychological investment in you staying the same. Your stagnation makes them comfortable. Your limitations validate their own. Your ceiling gives them permission to remain beneath theirs. So when you begin to change, when you start to move differently, speak differently, carry yourself with a new kind of quiet authority, do not be surprised when it unsettles them. Do not be surprised when the people who claim to support you suddenly become the loudest voices of doubt. This is not betrayal. This is psychology. They are not reacting to you. They are reacting to the mirror you are holding up to their own unrealized potential. The untouchable man understands this dynamic completely. He does not argue with it. He does not seek their approval for his transformation. He simply continues coldly, consistently, without explanation. The science of reinvention also demands that you understand the role of identity. Most men try to change their actions without changing who they believe they are, and this is exactly why they fail. You cannot behave like a powerful man while still believing deep down that you are the boy who was told he was too much, not enough, or both at the same time. Behavior follows belief with ruthless consistency. Before you can move like the man you are becoming, you must think like him. You must make decisions from his mindset. You must ask yourself in every moment of weakness, what would the man I am becoming do right now? And then do that, even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult, because the man you are becoming was built in those exact moments, the hard ones, the quiet ones, the ones where nobody was watching, and you chose greatness anyway. Right now, in the comments, type, I am no longer who they remember, because the reinvention has already begun. You are not the same person who pressed play on this video. Something has already shifted. Honor that shift. Feed it. Protect it with everything you have. Number 6. The power of silence and strategic invisibility. Most men talk far too much. This is not just an observation, it is an accusation. They speak to fill silence because silence makes them uncomfortable. They over-explain because they are secretly searching for approval. They announce their plans because they need external validation to believe in them internally. They reveal their wounds because they hope someone will care enough to fix them. And in doing all of this, in this constant, exhausting, desperate overflow of words, emotions, and intentions, they hand the world a complete map to every vulnerability they carry. They wonder why they are manipulated. They wonder why they are underestimated. They wonder why the rooms they enter never shift in their favor. The answer is brutally simple. You cannot be untouchable if you are completely readable. And most men are not just readable. They are an open book left in the rain on a crowded street with a sign inviting strangers to write in the margins. Machiavelli was precise about this. He wrote that the wise man does not say everything he thinks, but he always thinks about everything he says. Read that again and let it sink in. Because within those words exists an entire philosophy of power that most men will never truly grasp. Speech is not connection. Speech is not strength. In the wrong moment, in the wrong hands, speech becomes surrender. Every unnecessary word you speak is a brick removed from your wall. Every emotion you reveal without strategy is information handed freely to those who may use it against you. Every plan you announce before execution is a victory you have already begun to sabotage. The untouchable man understands that silence is not emptiness. Silence is pressure. Silence is presence. Silence is the psychological weight of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. Dark psychology explains why silence unsettles people so deeply. Human beings are wired to search for patterns, to read signals, to predict behavior. When a man speaks constantly, he is easy to map, easy to predict, easy to control. But the man who speaks with precision and withholds with intention becomes impossible to fully read, and what cannot be fully read cannot be fully controlled. This is strategic invisibility, not hiding, not shrinking, not disappearing out of fear. This is the deliberate, calculated control of your own narrative. It is the art of letting people know exactly what you choose for them to know, and nothing more. It is the discipline of guarding your inner world so fiercely that the only version of you the outside world ever encounters is the one you consciously present. This is not deception. This is sovereignty. There is also a deeper layer to silence that goes beyond strategy. Silence is where your power is refined. When you stop filling every moment with noise, external noise, digital noise, the noise of other people's opinions and expectations, you create the internal space where clarity exists. The untouchable man thinks more than he speaks. He observes more than he reacts. He processes before he responds. He sits with discomfort long enough to understand it instead of instantly escaping it through distraction. In that silence, he hears what others cannot hear. He sees patterns others cannot see. He develops an instinct so sharp, so refined through consistent discipline and deep inner work that he can walk into any room, any negotiation, any conflict, and understand the entire dynamic before most men have even finished their first sentence. And then there is the silence after the storm. When someone provokes you, disrespects you, or tries to diminish you in front of others, the weak version of you rushes to respond, to defend, to prove. The untouchable man becomes silent, not because he has nothing to say, but because he understands that the most powerful response is often no response at all. Let them wonder. Let them fill the silence with their own anxiety. Let their words hang unanswered until they feel the weight of their own insignificance. Your silence in those moments is not weakness. It is the coldest, most calculated form of dominance available to a man who has truly mastered himself. Right now, drop in the comments and type, "My silence speaks louder than your noise," because the man who has mastered his silence has mastered his power, and the world will feel it whether it understands it or not. Number 7. The Machiavellian art of cutting dead weight. There is a conversation most men are never willing to have with themselves. It is the conversation about who and what they need to permanently remove from their lives in order to become who they are meant to be. Not temporarily distancing, not politely reducing contact, removing completely, permanently, without guilt, without ceremony, and without needing them to understand why. Because here is the cold truth that soft philosophy will never tell you. Not every relationship in your life is an asset. Some are liabilities. Some are anchors disguised as companions. Some are slow leaks in the vessel you are trying to steer toward greatness, and no amount of loyalty, history, or emotional attachment changes the reality that a man moving toward power cannot afford to carry dead weight forever. The weak version of you will resist this. He will call it cold. He will call it selfish. He will remind you of shared memories and years invested. The untouchable man sees this argument for what it truly is: emotion being used against his own evolution. Machiavelli was brutally clear on this point. He understood that the ruler who surrounds himself with mediocre people eventually becomes mediocre through proximity. He wrote that the first judgment made about a ruler's intelligence is based on the quality of the people he surrounds himself with. Think about what that means for your life right now. Look at your inner circle with cold, honest, unfiltered eyes. Are the people closest to you pulling you upward or quietly keeping you where you are? Are their conversations expanding your perspective or recycling the same comfortable limits? Are they honest with you in ways that push your growth, or are they agreeable in ways that protect your ego while starving your potential? Because the people who only tell you what you want to hear are not your allies. They are the most refined form of enemy, the kind that smiles while holding you back. Dark psychology identifies this pattern with brutal clarity. It is called the crab bucket mentality, and it operates with disturbing consistency in the lives of men who are trying to rise. The moment you begin to climb, certain people in your environment will, consciously or unconsciously, start pulling you back. Not always through obvious sabotage, sometimes through subtle discouragement disguised as concern, sometimes through jokes that carry just enough edge to chip away at your confidence. Sometimes through their own visible dissatisfaction with their lives, creating an atmosphere so heavy with stagnation that ambition begins to feel out of place in their presence. You've felt this. You know exactly who these people are. The real question is not whether you can recognize them. The question is whether you value your future enough to make the difficult decision about them. Cutting dead weight is not arrogance. It is precise self-preservation. It is the understanding that your time, your energy, and your mental space are limited and valuable resources, and every hour invested in relationships that drain rather than build is an hour taken from the foundation of your greatness. The untouchable man is not cold-hearted. He is calculated. He understands the difference between people going through hard phases and people who have made struggle their permanent identity. He gives to those who are genuinely growing alongside him, but he has developed the discipline to recognize when a relationship has become a ceiling instead of a ladder. And when that moment comes, he does not hesitate. He does not negotiate. He redirects his energy with calm certainty, knowing his future is non-negotiable. Your environment is not just a background to your life. It is an active force, shaping either your rise or your stagnation. Choose every part of it with intention, strategy, and ruthless clarity, just as you would any other major decision about your future. Because the company you keep is not just a reflection of who you are, it is a prediction of who you will become. Drop in the comments right now and type, "I protect my energy like I protect my vision." Because the man who guards his environment guards his destiny. And that man is untouchable. Number 8, the discipline of becoming dangerous. Let's define what dangerous truly means in this context, because the world has diluted it, softened it, and turned it into something shallow and performative. When I say dangerous, I do not mean violent. I do not mean reckless. I do not mean the cheap, loud aggression of a man who needs others to fear him because he secretly fears himself. That is not danger. That is insecurity wearing a mask. When I say dangerous, I mean the kind of man who has mastered his mind, his emotions, his craft, and his vision so completely that he becomes genuinely difficult to stop. The kind of man whose commitment is absolute, whose focus is locked, whose standards are so uncompromising that the average world simply does not know how to deal with him. That is dangerous. That is the version of you that the weak version fears becoming. Because once that man emerges, there is no returning to smallness, no pretending that mediocrity was ever acceptable. Machiavelli understood that real power is not given, it is built, it is earned through sustained, unglamorous, relentless discipline that most men abandon the moment it stops feeling exciting. And this is where the illusion of motivation collapses. It feels like fuel, but it burns like paper. It ignites fast, burns bright, and disappears the moment conditions become difficult. The untouchable man does not rely on motivation. He operates on systems. He operates on identity. He operates on a standard so deeply ingrained that it exists independently of how he feels on any given day. He does not negotiate with discipline based on mood. He does not delay his standards because circumstances are inconvenient. He shows up precisely, consistently, without noise, because showing up is not a daily decision. It is a decision he made once at the deepest level of his identity and never questioned again. Dark psychology teaches that discipline is one of the most intimidating traits a human being can possess, not because it is loud, but because it is consistent. Consistency is rare. Consistency unsettles people who are used to chaos in their own lives. When a man shows up the same way every single day, same standards, same focus, same quiet intensity, regardless of external conditions, he creates a presence that most people cannot explain, but everyone can feel. They feel it in how he walks into a room. They feel it in the precision of his words. They feel it in the complete absence of desperation in everything he does. And that feeling, that invisible force of a man anchored deeply in his purpose, is more powerful than any display of force, more convincing than any argument, and more attractive than any external symbol of success. The discipline of becoming dangerous also means building an obsessive, almost monk-like relationship with your craft. Whatever field you have chosen, master it with a level of commitment that feels irrational to others. Study it while others sleep. Refine it while others distract themselves. Push its limits while others accept its boundaries. Because mastery is the ultimate form of power in a world filled with mediocrity. The man who is undeniably excellent at what he does not need to demand respect. He does not need to prove his value. He does not need to compete for position. His competence speaks with a level of authority that no amount of charm or self-promotion can replace. Excellence is the most undeniable argument a man can make for his own worth. The weak version of you wants results without the process. He wants the throne without the battle. He wants the harvest without ever working the soil alone in the dark. with no guarantee of reward. The untouchable man understands that the process is not the cost of greatness. The process is the purpose. Every moment of discipline, every choice of discomfort, every standard upheld when breaking it would have been easier. Hise are not sacrifices. They are investments into a version of yourself that compounds over time with unstoppable force. Drop in the comments right now and type, "Discipline is my most dangerous weapon," because the man who has mastered himself has mastered everything worth mastering. Number 9. The moment you become untouchable. This is the moment most men never reach, not because they lack ability, not because the world was against them, not because the timing was wrong or the resources were limited or the circumstances were unfair. They never reach this moment because they could not endure the in-between. The brutal, unglamorous, invisible stretch of time between who you were and who you are becoming, where nothing feels certain, nothing feels validated, and the only thing guiding you is a cold, unwavering conviction that what you are building is real, even when nothing around you confirms it yet. That in-between is where most men turn back. That is where the weak version of you presents his most convincing argument. That is where doubt disguises itself as wisdom and retreat disguises itself as strategy. And the men who fail to see through that illusion return to smallness and spend the rest of their lives justifying why greatness was never meant for them in the first place. Machiavelli wrote that there is nothing more difficult to execute, more uncertain of success, and more dangerous to manage than introducing a new order of things. He was speaking about kingdoms, he was speaking about power, but whether he intended it or not, he was also describing the internal war every man must fight when he decides to completely transform himself. Because creating a new order within yourself requires destroying the old one entirely. It means removing the beliefs, the habits, the identities, and the limitations that have controlled your inner world for years, sometimes for decades. And those structures do not collapse quietly. They resist, they push back, they use your own memories against you, they speak in your own voice, they wear the faces of people you trust. And the man who does not understand that this resistance is not failure, but proof that the transformation is real and significant, will always confuse the battle with defeat. Dark psychology identifies the exact moment a man becomes untouchable. And it is not when he achieves something visible. It is not when he gains wealth, status, or recognition. It is a deeply internal moment that happens in private, often in silence, with no audience and no applause. It is the moment a man no longer needs external validation to believe in his own worth. It is the moment his identity becomes so grounded, so solid, so completely his own that the opinions of others, their approval, their criticism, their attempts to define or diminish him, lose their pull entirely. They still exist, but they no longer control him. They no longer have access to the controls. And when a man reaches that level, that unshakable internal fortress, something changes in the way the world responds to him. People feel it before they understand it. They sense the absence of neediness, the absence of performance, the complete self-containment of a man who has nothing to prove and nowhere to hide, because he has already faced the worst version of himself and chosen to become something greater. The untouchable man carries his past without being controlled by it. He has processed every failure, every humiliation, every moment of weakness, not with bitterness, not with shame, but with a cold understanding that each of those experiences refined him, sharpened him, stripped away everything that was never truly him. He is grateful for the darkness because it showed him how much light he could generate on his own. He does not need the world to be easy on him, because he has built the internal strength to remain powerful regardless of conditions. He does not need perfect circumstances because he has trained himself to extract power from imperfect ones, like a master extracting gold from raw, unrefined ore. You are closer to this moment than you realize. The fact that you have stayed this far, that you have listened this deeply, that something in these words resonates with recognition instead of novelty, means the untouchable man is already forming within you. He has been forming this entire time. Every section of this video has been a layer of his armor. Every truth you accepted has been a brick in his foundation. Now it is your responsibility, not an option, not a suggestion, your responsibility to protect that version, to feed it, to reject every pull back towards smallness, with the quiet certainty of a man who has seen what he is capable of and refuses to go back. Drop in the comments right now and type, "I am no longer who they remember," because that version of you is gone. And what is rising in its place is something the world is not yet ready for. If this video touched something inside you that most content never reaches, then you are exactly where you need to be. Hit the like button right now, subscribe to Machiavellian Galaxy, and turn on notifications, because what comes next will go even deeper. The weak version of you found this channel by accident. The untouchable version of you will stay here on purpose.